Hey, deserving listeners, Natalia Grace documentary, second season. Let's watch.
Why didn't you leave?
That's the best question ever. I tried. And these answers aren't going to be what you're looking for to a degree, but I tried to leave her no less than 10 times. I ended up in the hospital regularly over it.
Why did you marry her?
That's a hell of a question.
Okay, so they're having a conversation. By the way, I've been watching and not necessarily reacting, but I'll just sprinkle in there's a lot of fluff in the second season, so there's not really a lot of reason to watch the scenes in its entirety, but there have been a lot of scenes demonstrating that Natalia was a young child, when she was adopted. And it's boring because I feel like that was already known to us as an audience from the previous document. I mean, the quote-unquote evidence that she was much older was spotty even when they were telling us, like her forehead was big, or that, they would show these pictures of her taking selfies with like duck face. And the judge said that, well, if you stop growing, that means you're 18. And since she stopped growing 4 years ago, then that must mean she's 22. What? And so it seemed very questionable in the beginning, and then of course other evidence came out. So there's a lot of scenes where they were going over like dental records and everything, and I'm just like, yeah, I think we all know that. But anyway, then there was evidence that Michael, even though he probably knew that Natalia was a young child, he continued to lie and say that she was an adult. So I don't know what that says. It could say that so I'm starting to gravitate around a perspective that both of the parents are to blame and both of the parents are responsible. Christine is perhaps more responsible for more of the abuse and neglect, and that Michael, in part, was going along with it because he was abused, maybe, or coerced. And I'm guessing that prior to him even meeting Christine, he has traumas that result in him trying to be a pleaser. I don't know that. There's not a ton of evidence of that, but I could see that being the case. Often, if you have an abusive person, especially if they have a long-term relationship, the other person will be a pleaser or codependent or dependent or something. So if we go with the allegations that Christine is indeed to some degree abusive, if not as abusive as she appears to be, then it would be unusual if he didn't have the mirror image of that personality. So that doesn't let him off the hook, right? If you are very people-pleasing and a codependent, or the opposite, if you're very dependent as an adult, that doesn't let you off the hook if you are observing abuse to your children, especially if you're also doing it sometimes, participating in it sometimes, for sure. So there's that. And I don't even know if legally, if you were able to demonstrate that you were a victim of ongoing spousal abuse, if you would legally be left off the hook from that as well. Morally, might we let people off the hook? I think there are cases like that. It's similar to being in a cult where you're terrified, you've been broken down, you don't have any agency anymore. So there's that. But has that been demonstrated to us sufficiently? I would say no. Is it possible that was happening? Sure, but it's hard to know. But I'm gravitating toward the perspective that he might have also had a similar drive, maybe not nearly as much as Christine. This is all speculative, of course, but that he wanted that accolade to be seen as a wonderful parent that's perfect and saintly. And, the fact that he, in the beginning of the documentary, he's talking about how we had all the Lamborghinis and the nice cars and the humongous house and 5,000 square feet. It's just, can you have a Lamborghini and not be narcissistic? Sure. But it just all kind of potentially, fits together. And that he had similar motivations around the adoption. He had similar hopes for his wife, that he would be secondary to that, but wanted that as well, that secondary shine of the light would go on him. And also wanted to get rid of Natalia when it was clear that Natalia wasn't going to be a genius and might even be a bad mark in their parenting record. And from the stories that even Natalia tells, when push came to shove, he would help her. He would help Natalia, and that Christine, according to Natalia, was just universally cold or abusive, whereas he at times would be warm or accommodating or helpful to her, minimally, at least in terms of the descriptions. That doesn't let him off the hook, right? But it does, by contrast, make him not as bad. So I'm sort of gravitating around a multifactorial reason as to why he did what appears to be what he did. Some of those factors absolutely hold him responsible, but provide some explanation. And other factors might actually let him off the hook, depending on how you look at it. So there's that. And I think as he is talking to Natalia, and he knows he's being filmed, I think he really wants some validation or something. I think the way that he talks, it's so off-putting. It's comes across as very fake and exaggerated, which doesn't help his credibility. It doesn't erase his credibility. I think actually a fair amount of time he is telling the truth. I can't know, but I think that there's a good possibility. Just because someone has histrionic behaviors and I've treated many histrionic people. I specialize in personality disorders, so I can tell you that they, especially when they're under the microscope, they will have a lot of this dramatic, over-expressive way of talking. And if they're not particularly good at it, which not all of them are, they'll come across as though they're lying or they're greatly exaggerating almost all the time. And yet, they're often telling the truth. So can they lie? Yeah. Histrionic people probably are more likely to lie. I haven't seen the research on that recently. But anyway, so he is now trying to explain to her. I think what he's looking for is, hey, I was a victim too. But I think what would be a better approach, especially to me as a viewer, would be if he said, look, looking back, I did some bad things. And I'm so sorry to you, Natalia. We never should. I should have stood up to Christine. I also did bad things myself, and I'm sorry. But as I say this, it's like, well, then he would go to prison potentially, right? So it's like, but I guess there's a version that he could say that would not implicate him criminally. So something along those lines, and say to Natalia, because he hasn't really. This isn't a meeting between two politicians. This is a meeting between an adoptive parent and a child that was absolutely thrown away in a very cruel way. So you just think that he would sit down and say, Natalia, I just want to say from the outset that it looks like you were a kid, and I have to say I probably should have accepted that. At the time, I'll get into it, but I let you down. I was your dad. I am your dad. And I should have protected you. I should have been a better parent. I know that now. And I'm just something like that. And then, because that's, even if you go with the allegations that Natalia was highly problematic towards everybody in the home, she was a child. So it's like, you're the adult. So I think he would say something like that. And then he would say, and I've done a lot of thinking, I've been through a lot of therapy, and I realize that I have problems with my personality that results in me deferring to other people a lot and living in a constant state of fear. And that's on me and I guess my upbringing. So there's that problem. That's all independent of everyone else. Now, the other part of this is that Christine, we all know, and I was terrified of her, and over time, it sort of broke me down to just be totally focused on her. And I'm not going to go into details because I don't think you need details. If you want details, I guess I could give some of them, but that doesn't let me off the hook really, because I should have known better. I should have gone to therapy. I should have consulted with other people. I have two eyes. I saw what was happening, and I didn't do anything, and that's on me, and frankly, I'm terribly ashamed about it, and I can't sleep at night because of it. Something like that, I think, to my eyes, would be. I mean, as I say that out loud, I often will do this kind of role play. It's like, what would be something that I would hope I would say if I were in those shoes, or what would I like to see? And it always seems absurd as I'm saying it, because we almost never see these kinds of displays from people, whether it's an apology video or a documentary or a reality TV show. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we do, for sure. But anyway, so other things that we learned was that there was another family, there was a third family that was interested in adopting Natalia from the Cicones from New Hampshire, and they almost adopted her before the Barnetts did. But according to the legal expert, the Cicones found out about a CPS report that had been filed against them, the Cicones. So presumably in New Hampshire, the local Child Protective Services reached out to the family and said, hey, we heard an allegation. And the family suspected that the new family that wanted to adopt Natalia had actually made the CPS report, which is kind of a logical suspect, right? Because you get especially if you have been protective of information getting out of your household, which I don't know if they had done, and now you send Natalia, and if Natalia was potentially prone to lying or manipulating people, and that's why you're actually wanting other people to adopt her. She is now staying with another family, and lo and behold, all of a sudden a CPS report. It would be a logical suspect or logical suspicion. And the family said, no, we didn't call CPS. We don't know what you're talking about. But Cicones were not necessarily convinced, apparently, and so they denied this other family the opportunity to adopt Natalia. And you just think if this other family, or any of the families that were highly considering to adopt Natalia, if they had adopted Natalia, how different things would have been. Might Natalia had some behavioral problems? Could be, probably, honestly, but they wouldn't have been exacerbated and exaggerated and compounded by the abuse that allegedly the Barnetts committed against her. But I'm wondering if this is the main course of this second series of this sit down between the two people. And I don't know how comfortable I am watching this, because this is something that I might be a part of as a therapist. And it's fairly intimate and fraught. Natalia has a big reason to hate him. Even if Natalia had a lot of behavior problems, it doesn't really matter. She was a kid, and she was campaigned against pretty maliciously to make her into an adult and then kick her out. It's even if he wasn't the ringleader of that all, he was an adult. He could have done something, and not only did nothing about it, but he actually participated in it. So she has a lot of reason to be angry. He might have a lot of reason to try to make the case that he wasn't as responsible. Maybe he was only sort of responsible, but he thinks if I admit sort of responsibility, then people will think that I'm responsible for everything. But I'm not responsible for everything. He could also just be in complete denial of his responsibility.
Why did you marry her?
That's a hell of a question.
Before you do that, let's respect God in this place.
Okay, so that individual is Antoine Mans, who is a reverend or a bishop and a religious leader, and he is the new adoptive parent of Natalia. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's a new year, so of course it's time for New Year's resolutions, but often those are just manifestations of internalized harmful voices that tell us we're not good enough. So instead of making a resolution to change something, let's recognize that we are already good enough. Now, most people think of therapy as a place for us to work on our problems, But there are several schools of thought within the field of psychotherapy that adamantly reject that paradigm, like narrative therapy and solution-focused. Instead, these clinicians help us focus on what we're already doing well. And by helping us do that, data shows that we often will gravitate towards more beneficial patterns. Well, one place you can find such therapists is on BetterHelp. If you're thinking of starting therapy, it's definitely worth giving a try. So celebrate the progress you've already made. Visit betterhelp.com/Kirk today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Kirk.
I'm sorry.
All right, let's not use curse words. I know you talk like this on a regular basis, maybe, but we try to keep a clean environment. Yeah. So let's
this is really hard. I don't.
We'll respect everyone's boundary. No more than you ask Michael not to be himself. I will not ask you not.
So then Terrence, this other person talking off camera, is his lawyer, Michael's lawyer, the lawyer that defended him during the criminal case in 2020 was the trial. I'm not sure, or 2023, I'm not sure. But so now we have advocates for both of them going at each other. So the criticism to Michael is that he was swearing, and I don't remember him swearing, but I'll take their word for it. And so he's chastising him, saying not to swear. it's swearing. Plus, I was raised Christian, and swearing isn't, it's against culture. But to say a swear word isn't inherently, at least in the belief system that I had growing up, God isn't that sensitive. Let's just put it that way.
That sounds crazy, right? Don't be a Christian. See, you can't impose your standard.
I don't want to have fights.
He's his own man. You understand that?
It's okay.
And God is in control.
No,
you understand that?
That's this.
God is in control.
So now these two randos are fighting, and he's saying, "I'm out of here." Yeah. I don't blame him, honestly. It's like, this is raising the tension. It's already tense. This is already hard. So I see something happening. This is getting out of control. He might even have had an urge to be an intermediary, and then he's thinking, why am I doing this? I don't know. It's also possible that he didn't know that Natalia was going to be hostile, at least kind of, and he's using this as an excuse to get out of it. I don't know.
We're not gonna do anything with.
I tried.
This is what we might call, we can use this as a jumping off point for histrionic behavior. So when children are neglected and abused, there's a set of available defenses that children naturally gravitate towards, either due to their own disposition or trial and error or modeling or something. And one of the defenses, and sometimes it depends on the kind of abuse that's happening, but if you are being harmed and you're not being attended, you're not being given enough attention, then the child feels unloved, the child feels unsafe, because we seem to have evolved as a species to be highly driven towards having enough attunement and attention and love from our caregivers when we're very young. And it seems as though a mechanism to drive us to make sure that we want that and signal for it and make sure that we get it so that we can stay alive, because if we're not very noticeable to our parents, they might leave us behind and we might die. So apparently an evolved emotional response is that if I'm not getting attention as a child, and this is everybody, if I'm not getting attention as a child, I need to lean into, I need to make myself more noticeable. I need to cry louder, or I need to be louder, or I need to tug at their pant leg. It's pay attention to me. And the motivation isn't of just like mild interest. It's terror. It's fear. You'll see it when your kids. If you go around the corner, I remember this when I was a kid. I would fall asleep in the car, still do sometimes as a passenger, and I remember I would fall asleep in the car at the age of 3, and my family wouldn't want to wake me up because it's like, he's taking a nap. So they'd go inside the house, and I'd wake up in the car, in the driveway by myself, and I would just start wailing. And part of it is just being in a cranky mood when you wake up and just kind of disoriented. It's like, why am I in the car? I mean, I remember that happening at least once, and that's normal, right? We understand that we're crying. I was crying out of terror, out of fear. It's like, oh my God, and why do I feel that? Even though I know they're just a few feet away in the house, it's like, but it just this drive to get that attention. And so when his children were not getting that attention and or were being abused, then we have this drive. It's fear-based, just like terror. It's just utter terror. And the child is not getting their attention. One of the available defenses is to become very, very noticeable. And this becomes neurological to the point where emotions are felt bigger. It's not drummed up. The child doesn't invent or exaggerate their emotions. They might kind of at times, but over time, the brain and the nervous system become oriented actually to feel emotions more acutely in a bigger way, in a more intense way, particularly if they're emotions that are related to garnering attention, like you're in danger, or you are telling a story, or you're happy. Just laughing, can be a form of expression that can get attention from other people. And so for these kids, they learn somewhat consciously, but mostly unconsciously, and then it develops neurologically into feeling emotions bigger and signaling emotions bigger, and just signaling in general. Even if they're just telling an unemotional story, they have to have like lots of noticeable communication styles. They become very good at, they could tell just the most boring story, but it will be very, particularly if they're really good at it and they are smart enough to figure out how to develop this skill. And again, it's mostly subconscious. They become extremely good storytellers. And you'll be hearing them say just a regular story, just like, oh my God, this is so interesting. And when they're angry at you, they're very angry at you. When they're happy with you, they're very happy with you. There's also a bit of borderline in there as well, in that there's some all or nothing, there's some black and white, there's some I hate you, I love you kind of stuff happening. It's not the hallmark, but it does come along with it. Lack of a connection to self, emotional regulation issues, most personality disorders have these kinds of things. And so for the individual, they, when triggered in particular, they will have this extreme motivation to express themselves emotionally in a very dramatic, very over-the-top manner. And I don't know, I can't evaluate someone over the internet or on a TV show about a personality disorder, but this is one of the displays that would be indicative of histrionic personality disorder. And I've done whole deep dives on histrionic. So just if you want to know what might look like in a situation like this is what it might look like.
I'm not doing anything with
I tried.
So you would think if he was wanting to leave, he would just walk out. But you also add to this of, I'm suffering and you're fighting against me, because the production, they don't necessarily care about his feelings, because if as a human being, I would just let him go. This is rough. But you're a production crew and you're being paid to get footage, and so you can fill the minutes of a documentary, and you have a boss that might get on your back if you just let him walk out the door. So you're going to do everything you can. You're, hey, but you can't put hands on, but you can use all your skills. I've become aware that producers of reality TV / documentaries, I'm guessing, are hired partly on their demonstrated skill to be able to convince people to stay on camera and do things on camera. It's not just that they're good at developing questions or figuring out a place to shoot and how to communicate to the camera personnel, but actually how to influence the subjects, So the producer's going against him, and he's not getting validation. And he's also in a rough spot because he knows that, this is a very shameful situation. I imagine that he does have a heart, and that a lot of shame is emerging for him in this moment. He's trying to make a case that he was a victim as well, but he knows not everyone sees it that way, particularly Natalia, and he probably doesn't necessarily see it entirely that way himself either. So, there's a lot of emotions. I tried. And I think another personality arena that I have been wondering about him is what we might briefly call just people pleasing, we might call dependent. Also, there's overfunctioning and codependent, but at the very least, a deferral to other people and desperately trying to please others. Maybe in addition to the histrionic defense, there was another defense of just trying to be as pleasing as possible and as helpful as possible and putting yourself aside. And so when you're being asked to do something, hey, I want you to be in this documentary, because that's another part of this. It's like, why did he agree to be in the documentary to begin with? There's not a reason. He probably overall loses by being in the documentary, but he did it anyway. Christine isn't in it because she probably figured it was not a good idea, So for him to be asked to be in a documentary, he might just feel like, well, I'm used to doing what other people want me to do, which would fit well with an abusive person if we believe that Christine was terribly abusive. And then he's being asked by the producer, hey, stay. And it really is a conflict for him, right? This is a visceral reaction he's having to get out of the door, the producer. And then all these things come in. And then the histrionic part comes in of just like, you're not paying attention to me. And that's what the experience was like for the 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old child, where it's, there's an anger in there sometimes, obviously, where you're not paying attention, you're not hearing me. And so you can imagine someone getting bigger and louder and repetitive. It's sort of like the way a child would speak. I want to go home. 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 It's not the way an adult would speak, right? Even if they were distressed. It's an interesting presentation.
God is in control.
No, that was it.
We're not gonna do anything with
I tried,
We're
I
gonna do
tried, I
it's okay.
tried, I tried, I tried, I tried, I tried. I tried it and I tried and I tried to get rid of that monster and that beast. And I'm trying to talk through everything and fix this.
Let me talk to you. Let me talk to you. Hold on a second. Let me talk to you.
No.
Yeah. I've had clients like this, family, not exactly, but I've had clients like this, and I just feel not great about a documentary about them being shown to everyone. I feel like they need some talking head on this documentary to say, like, look, let's all look at the bigger picture here, or even ask questions about his childhood and his parents. It doesn't let him off the hook, but it provides some context around this. Also, there's been up to this point almost, I think, no discussion or extremely minimal discussion of how attachment works and how early development works for someone like Natalia. The way this whole thing is playing out, and of course it works on the audience better if you have a scapegoat, right? You have, at first, it's like basically there's 2 chapters to the story. You have Natalia as a monster, like the movie Orphan. It's like, whoa, how weird is that? Scary. It's like a horror movie. But really, the parents are a monster, and Natalia is this innocent person. Oh my God, the parents are awful parents. I hate awful parents. And then, that's it. You just walk away. But those perspectives aren't typically the kinds of perspectives that clinicians and experts will have when they actually assess and help families like this. It's way more nuanced. So I don't know. I just feel bad for everybody. I guess particularly Natalia.
Come here for a second.
No, I came here to try to...
Wait, let me speak to you for a second. Can I do that? Hold on.
And then the person who caused this whole problem, and now Natalia, poor Natalia, has her hands over her face. So the fella's like, I want to talk to you. If he really wanted to help, he could say, look, I'm sorry, I won't say anything anymore. Maybe that would help. But some sort of power play? What's going on?
Let him do that. I got it. Michael, come here for a second, man. I'm not here to degrade you. Hey, come here. I'm not here.
God would not do to me what happened. Leave me alone.
Wow. Yeah, this is starting to look more and more like reality TV and not a documentary. What's the difference, I suppose, but yeah.
No,
So listen to me.
If there was a God, he would let me die. He would have let me die.
He don't want you to die because he loves you.
All I wanted was just to talk to him.
Let me die? What is he saying? Let me die?
He would have let me die.
He don't want you to die because he loves
If there was a God, he would have let me die. Let me die. Is he referring to one of the suicide attempts he had? Is this another or is this a manipulation to make people feel sorry for him? I don't know. Just let him go home. I'm not a fan of when people, it feels paparazzi-ish, right? That you provoke, like, why did these other people even have to be in the room? Why couldn't you just have a few production people and then the subjects? Why did, and they probably didn't predict this would happen, but you certainly don't have to follow them outside.
Step away from me.
All right.
He shouldn't have talked to my dad that way. All my dad asked was that he didn't cuss. Just have some respect. My dad has the right to ask that. Just like I do. I don't understand.
And all this is over Michael, supposedly he swore. I don't even remember him swearing. I guess I could go back and watch. But he said a swear word as he was struggling, and all of this is because of that. Jiminy Cricket. Yeah. Yeah, and the pain of all these individuals, particularly Natalia, it's just a lifetime of pain. It sounds like things for the past few years have been going well with the man's family, which is just awesome. I am very happy about that. But just a lifetime of pain, just a lifetime of trauma and abandonment and mistreatment. Yeah, it's yeah. I hope she's on the road to recovery. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.